Well, welcome back for our final discussion on the self-directed positive change and the change wheel. We've talked about the hub and the first five spokes of the wheel, which are the first five questions we have to ask ourselves. And now today we're just going to get into the last question and that last spoke, and then we're going to talk about the rim and what kind of holds all those spokes together. So we've got a whole wheel. Our last question that we have to ask ourselves is, what do I do now? So we've got everything set up, right? We know what we're changing. We know why we're changing it. We know when we're changing it. We know what we need, and we have what we need, which is our self-inventory. We've got our supporter and our reminder and observer in place. We know how we're going to measure our change, right? Through self-observation, through the observation of our observer, and through the unaware observers. Now, okay, what do I do? What do I do now? Now that I got everything in place. And the answer is, do you remember what the answer is? It is, I do what the person that I've identified that I want to be would do.
Okay.
So we have to go look at our self-inventory and say, okay, what are these people that I've identified? And what did I identify that they do that are the fruits of this character trait?
And this is where we're identifying actions, possibly habits that we want to form that will be part of building that character.
That character, right.
So if your initial hub was one we talked about at the beginning, that you want to become really good at personal scripture study, then you might say, well, the people I know who are really good at personal scripture study, I identified Seth. He gets up and he reads his scriptures first thing in the morning every day before he does anything else. So I want to do that. I want to have a set time so that I do it every day. And maybe because I want to be like him, I'll do it first thing in the morning, but maybe I'm going to want to be like him just in having a specific time. And my time might be in my lunch break at work or in the evening before I go to bed. It doesn't mean you have, because you're identifying their behavior, that you have to mimic it exactly.
Right.
But you're drawing inspiration from them.
Correct.
And then you might say, oh, and I know my uncle, who I really admire, I know that when he studies his scriptures, that he writes down notes of what he's thinking about in his scripture. So I'm going to do that thing too.
So I'm going to keep a scripture journal.
Yeah.
Right. So exactly. That's what we're doing.
And I know that President Nelson, who I admire, I read his talks where he talks about different things in studying the scriptures, and he talks about how he looks for Jesus Christ in the scriptures. So I'm going to do that.
Right. Yeah. So that's it. That's what we're doing now. But here's how it has to work. You've already identified in your who do I want to be part of your self-inventory. You've already identified the tasks that you want to accomplish, the things you want to do that will make you become the person that you want to be. But you can't do them all at once. It never works. You will sabotage your change. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go through that essay that you wrote, or that journal entry, or the narrative that you wrote up. And you're going to write down all of those qualities that make up the character that you're trying to create within yourself.
But in this case, finally, you're going to make a list. We weren't doing lists before.
Right.
But now you are going to make out a list so that you can prioritize.
Right. So you're going to make your list, and then you're going to choose. And here's the thing. With this one, more often than not, it doesn't matter which one you do first, because eventually your goal is to be doing all of them. That's what you want to be doing, is all those things that you've identified, all those fruits of that character trait. You want to demonstrate that in your behavior. So now you pick. And I actually oftentimes I encourage people very first to pick the easiest task.
Yeah.
To give yourself some encouragement, because remember, you're trying to build self-worth. Part of that is confidence. So if you can start a behavior show yourself that you're capable and that you're reliable, that will make it easier to go to the next one.
Yeah. And sometimes the small task that you want to start with, the easy one at first, you should start with something that's even easier than you think. You might think it's too easy. For instance, a few years ago when I wanted to start on a personal health change journey, and the first thing that I identified I wanted to do was go for a morning walk. The first step that I took was that my first goal was, when I first get up in the morning, I'm going to put on my exercise shoes. So put on clothes that I can go on a walk in, and put on my walking shoes. And at first, that was it.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have to actually go on a walk. I just had to get dressed for a walk. And then after that, you might add, okay, I'm going to go on a 5-minute walk.
Right.
You know, but I can't remember where I got that specific idea of the exercise shoes. It might have been from the Atomic Habits book, which I read around that time. I read some other books around that time too. But the point is that often the first step you want to take is a very small step that you will be able to do successfully and feel good about your success.
And it's usually a preparatory thing that you're doing, like you're putting on your shoes, right? That's preparing to walk. It's not walking yet, but it's doing the things to get yourself prepared and ready to walk. So you might start with the preparatory things as your goal to, you know, that those tasks. But remember, and it's really important to remember this, we learn line upon line and precept upon precept. That's the way the Lord teaches us. So we should be mimicking that when we're trying to instill in ourselves a new character. It is not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes time to develop into. And it's interesting, I'll tell you, it's interesting because I think sometimes when I work with people, oftentimes they say, well, what about Alma the Younger? He got visited by the angel and then he was just righteous after that. But you know, the problem that I have with that is that there's no indication of that. We don't know how long it took Alma the Younger to go from seeing the angel and being forgiven of his sins to actually having the character trait that we see later in the book of Alma. Right? Earlier, we don't see, you know, there's a period of time between this moment and the next time that we actually see Alma is years later. So people have this idea that Alma saw an angel and he just was changed instantaneously. But there's no indication of that. And in fact, if you think about Joseph Smith was visited by God the Father and Jesus Christ. Later, he was visited by, first he was visited by them. It wasn't until years later that he felt like he had lost sight of what that vision meant, that he felt like he was not living the way he should, that he prayed and was actually praying to ask forgiveness because he felt like he had not changed. And that's when the angel Moroni came to him and told him about the golden plates. But even then, the Lord didn't give him the golden plates for another 4 years because he still had to grow and become the man that would be able to receive those plates. And so we see that even people like Joseph Smith and like Alma the Younger, their changes were not overnight. They weren't sudden changes.
Yeah. And so the first task that you choose to work on, we recommend that you start with a small version of that task and that you add incrementally to that task before you move on to another task. I use this technique with my children in homeschool. Often when you're teaching a child to read, it's exhausting to them. It's hard for us to remember when we didn't know how to read, and when reading a line or two, reading 10 or 20 words was hard work. It was like a workout, mental workout. You know, and so when I'm starting reading lessons, my reading lessons are 5 minutes, less sometimes. You
Yeah.
know, they're just very, very brief. And then I'm incrementally building up that, or handwriting. When a child is writing, maybe at first they just write a letter a
Mm-hmm.
few times, and then maybe they're writing a few short words, and then I might say, okay, your assignment is to write 5 words or 10 words.
Well, I was just
And it's building up little by little till I have a goal that they will be able to write multiple pages fluently, but it takes a long time of little steps to get there.
I just read Ramona the Pest,
Oh yes, by
and in
Beverly
Ramona,
Cleary.
yeah, and in Ramona the Pest, she's in kindergarten, and she is learning the alphabet, but the teacher is teaching one letter at a time. And they go through the entire year, and by the end of the year, they've learned the alphabet. She doesn't know how to read. She knows the alphabet. And she knows a couple of words that she's taught herself based on her understanding of the alphabet. But that's all she's learned. And I've just started reading Ramona the Brave, which is her first grade, and this is, I think, the book where she's going to learn to actually read.
And even though some reading programs now, they focus more on getting you to read faster than just teaching the
Mhm.
alphabet first, there's something to be said conceptually and philosophically for the idea that we have to be okay with building foundations for quite a while before we see the progress that we want to see.
But I also love when your walking goal, and that you used the 1%.
Oh yeah, I was
better, which-
gonna bring that up, and I first really encountered this idea of 1% better in the book Atomic Habits, and then there was a general conference talk a couple years ago that used the same idea and some of the same
Mhm.
stories from the book, and then this last spring, so actually not quite spring, the beginning of Lent, I decided that I wanted to make some positive health changes, and I wanted to. I was feeling over the winter. The winter had been really difficult for
Mhm.
me, and I thought my life will be better if I become more active and healthier. So, as part of my Lenten journey, I decided to evaluate my activity level. Now, I have a step counter on my phone, like many people have on some sort of mobile device they keep with them, and I had a step count goal. And my step count goal for the last year or two had been 8,000 steps a day. And when I looked at my step counter, I saw, I had made my goal one time in the last week. So I set it for a month. I'd made it 3 times in the last month. I had reached my goal. And then I looked at the last year, and it said 30 times in the last year. Not even once a week, barely over once every 2 weeks, was I achieving this goal. And so I had to really face realistically, like, what good is this goal if I'm never making this goal? So I looked at what my average actually had been over that last week and month period, and I said, this is my starting point. This is what I'm actually doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to add 1% every day to my goal until I get it up to the 8,000 steps. That was my original goal. And so I started doing that, and I was compounding it 1% every day. And it took about 2 months to get back to the 8,000 step goal. And that was the first part of the middle of February, because it was the
Mhm.
beginning of Lent. And this is now into September. This is almost 7 months since then, and I have not missed a day of meeting my step count goal in that approximately 200-day period.
Yeah.
And that was because I did all your change wheel steps, but it was also because I was making incremental progress instead of saying, okay, my goal is to do 8,000 steps. I'm gonna be really dedicated now. I've done all the change wheel things, so I can jump in and do 8,000 steps because I've set it up.
Because rather than just setting a goal, to a behavioral goal, you decided you were going to change your person. You were going to change your character. You were going to be the person who
Going to be an active person. That's really
Yeah.
what it was. It was, I wanted to move from being sedentary. I wanted to be an active person.
right.
And the 8,000 I picked as a number based on a statistic that I saw that showed health gains at the level of 7,500 steps and above, and another thing that marked levels of activity, said, oh, this level of steps a day is sedentary and this is moderately active. And it started marking people as active at 7,500 steps and above. And that's what I wanted to be in the active level.
So in this step, what do I do now? What you do is you figure out where you are, and I love your example because it tells us exactly what you need to do. Find out, where am I today? That's your starting point, right? You're not starting at the finish line. You're starting where you are. And then you're just adding a little bit each day to improve. And it might start off with just putting your sneakers on, rather than putting on, shoes that would be uncomfortable for walking. You're starting by getting yourself ready. And you might do that for a couple of weeks. And then you might start to actually take some steps and be like, okay, so what is my average step count, right? And then you'd be like, okay, so I can walk for 5 minutes comfortably. Great, that's where I'm going to start then. And you might add a little bit of time to that each day, just a little bit, right? And then once you get that down, and you're comfortably walking, and you're enjoying it, it's a part of who you are. Then you're going to go back and you're going to look at your list again. You're going to be, okay, what's the next thing that I can add in here, right? So you're only going to be working on one major task at a time, and you're going to start from where you are, and then you're going to work to where you want to be, to where you're comfortable being this new person.
And while we've said that it should be easy to start, maybe even easier than you think, ideally in your moving forward steps, you should be hitting a sweet spot between something that's challenging to you and something that's not so challenging that it's discouraging, frustrating, or hard to keep going on.
Oh,
If it has no challenge level for you, you're not going to make any progress.
It's interesting because one of the tools that I help people with when they're wanting to get up at a certain time of day and they're having a hard time and they're sleeping in a lot and they're like, I really want to get up. And I say, well, the first thing to do is just to throw the blanket off the bed.
Like the alarm goes off.
And I say, just take your blanket and just throw it off the bed. And they're like,
So you don't have to get up then. You just have to throw the blanket off.
I just say, just throw the blanket off. And you're just trying something simple. And then after they've done that for a couple of weeks, then I might say, okay, after you throw the blanket off, I want you to stand up and just say out loud, I like life. And that's just a tool that they can use to kind of keep themselves moving. And it just adds a little bit more to the, to getting up. And gradually we're able to build for them a routine of getting up at the right time. And it's amazing how well that works. But what you're doing again is you're thinking of what are the tasks that need to be accomplished in order for me to have the success to become the person that I want to be. And you're just adding those tasks a little bit at a time. And you don't want to add them too quickly, because if you add them too quickly, they start to stack up and they start to become overbearing. And so you want to go gradually. Don't add a second task until the first task is really a part of yourself, that you really feel like, man, this is who I am. For you, it might be, hey, I'm a person who gets prepared for walking in the morning. And only after you're comfortable with that person do you add in that next step.
All right, so what is the rim of the change wheel, the thing that holds it all together?
So the rim of the change wheel is, the word for the rim is continuity. Continuity, that's what the rim is. And that has two parts, right?
Everything has two
Everything
parts
has
with
two
you.
parts. Well, with the change wheel, like,
I know,
you know,
just-
like, except for that the who has three parts.
Okay, fine.
But they do all have multiple parts because that's the way it works. It's just the way it is. So the first part of continuity is that you continue doing the actions that you've identified in what do I do now. It's continuous. You don't stop. You don't do it once and then you're done. There's continuity in what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's the part of repentance that's the don't do it again or continue to do.
Right. Either you don't return to the sin, whether the sin was a sin of omission or a sin of commission. You're not going backwards. So that's what the continuity is. It's
And in the
keeping you
principles
moving
of
forward.
the gospel, it's like the endure to the end.
Right, exactly. You just keep doing it. And so that's the first part of continuity. The second part of continuity is that you're going to continue to review the change wheel on a regular basis. So probably at least twice a month, you should be looking through your change wheel, going through it, and checking off, asking yourself, is this really the change I'm trying to make? Or is my hub off somehow? Do I need to adjust what I'm trying to be? Then you want to look at your first question. Why am I trying to change? With this one, you're identifying whose self-worth you're building. Look at that. Is this actually building my self-worth? Is it actually building these other people's self-worth that I thought I was going to be building?
Sometimes as you start working on goals or changes, you will get a little off course. You'll get kind of absorbed in the actions you're doing themselves, and you'll forget why you were doing them. And when you do that, it's easy to do the actions in the wrong way, to choose the wrong actions or the wrong amounts or frequency or
Right.
things. So this is just a course correction.
And it becomes what ends up happening a lot of times, and this is one of the ways that people sabotage their change, is they get through the change wheel and they start doing the sixth spoke, and they forget that I'm trying to change who I am, not just what I do. And then they get caught up in the actions and the habits, and they start creating habits rather than creating character change.
In my example of my personal step count goal this year,
Mm-hmm.
I saw the challenge in that when I reached back to 8,000 steps, I was like, oh, maybe I should just keep going and going. I could have my step count. By the end of the year, my step count could be, I can't even remember what I calculated it at. But I was starting to think about that my goal was increasing steps ad infinitum.
Right.
When really my goal was to become
active
to
person.
become an active person. And so when I had reached this level, the correct thing for me to do was to move into maintenance and to have other things that I increased my activity, like say, okay, now I need to add some
Stretching.
workouts. I need to add stretching. I need to add these other things. But I could have just been like, whoo, this is fun. I'm adding steps every day.
Right.
I'm going up
And
this
that's-
uphill climb.
And that's that idea and that's the difference between goal setting. We were talking about this the other day. Goal setting and what was the other word?
Habit formation.
And habit formation. Yeah. So, so here
I
we're,
know you said this isn't habits, but in the sense that when you have a goal, sometimes the goal undercuts the actual habit or even character change, because you get focused on this goal itself or its finish line.
Which is like what you were talking about. Is the goal was to get to 8,000 steps, and once you got there, it was like, whoa, this is really fun. I'm excited that this is, and it made you want to extend the goal.
The other danger there would be when I reach the goal to be like, whoo, I've reached the goal, reward, hey, and then to fall off.
Right.
Because I had reached my goal.
If you're giving yourself, if you're thinking, now I'm going to get a reward and I'm going to be done, that's a problem. When we're trying to change character, We're never working for a reward. We're not setting a reward for ourselves.
The reward is the being.
Right.
The reward for becoming an active person is being an active person.
Right. So that's the thing, is you don't want to get caught in this trap of just habit building or just goal setting. You want those tasks that you set for yourself, those are the fruits of becoming. And that's what you want to do. That's why so we're going to go back and we're going to look at this. Am I still becoming? Have I lost sight? Do I need to refocus? Okay, so then you're going to go down to that next question, and it says, when am I going to make the change? You don't have to worry about the start because you've already started, but what you do have to worry about is the finish. And you look at that, and you have to ask yourself, am I getting closer to what I want to be at the rate that I thought I was? And you might have to adjust it. You might have to say, I put 6 months, but I'm not going to make it in 6 months. I might need to add another 3 months to that.
And that should not feel like a failure. That should feel like a proper adjustment that you're making. This isn't a, on
the other hand,
any adjustments that you're making as you review your change wheel are not failures of your original wheel.
They're a part of the original wheel. That's the continuity that we're talking about. And that's why we have to recognize the wheel is flexible. It's very there. Each question has a specific answer, but that answer is also flexible. So when I set the goal for myself to be a kind father, my original goal was set for 12 months. I actually found, once I was about at six months, I found that I think I'm moving faster than I thought I would. And so I actually pulled my time frame to 9 months rather than 12 months because I felt like, I think in 9 months I can be this person.
And that's giving you a signal ahead of time. By 9 months, I'm going to want to have something else that I'm going to start working on.
Right, I want to have something else to start working on, but it also told me that not to slow down with the change that I'm, because I was moving faster than I thought, and there's this risk of saying, oh, I don't have to work so hard, and so I thought, at the rate that I'm going, 9 months is where I'm going to be complete with this, and I'm going to be this person, and I don't want to give myself permission to relax. Because as soon as you give yourself permission to relax and slow down, you've sabotaged your change and you've procrastinated. Remember, it's as soon as possible. It's not, I'm setting a date and that's the date that it has to be. It's always, the answer is as soon as possible. And that means sometimes you're going to have to adjust because sometimes you're just not moving, you're not going to be able to move as fast as you thought you would, and sometimes you're moving faster than you thought you would. And so you're going to need, every time you go through that change wheel, you're going to need to look at that and make any adjustments that need to be made on the end date. Then you're going to move, you're just going to do the same thing all the way around. You're going to look at your what do you call it?
Hub?
No,
spokes.
We already did that one. The third spoke, which is your self-inventory.
Oh, yes.
And this is an important one of part of the continuity, is that at least once a month you're looking at your self-inventory and you're checking to see, am I eliminating these behaviors that I didn't want, and am I adding these behaviors that I did want? Because it's going to be a balance. You're going to have to eliminate some and add some. And so you're going to look at that. Is the person that I want to be more like the person that I am today than the person that I was when I began? Right? And then you're going to go on and you're going to look at your supporter, your reminder, your observer, and we've already talked about this. You're just going to make sure that each of those people are fulfilling their roles, and if not, you're going to make some changes. Then you're going to go to your observation. And at least once a month, you should be talking with your observer about how am I doing. They're going to be helping you go through this process. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to go up to that question, what do I do now? Well, if I've made the change in one of the tasks and I've become who I want to be, then I'm going to pick the next task. If I haven't made the change, I'm going to ask myself why. What's been holding me back? from making this change and being able to move to that next task. And then you're gonna make whatever adjustments you need to make, and then you're gonna continue to do those acts again. And so continuity is a very important part of the change wheel, and it keeps that wheel spinning in motion. And that's what we want, is that wheel to be spinning, constantly moving, with our actions and also with our review.
Yeah. All right. This has been a great class on the change wheel. Are you planning to have another level of this class later that helps people to maybe problem solve with some things that come up as you're actually implementing your change wheels?
I'm sure we'll be doing another advanced or intermediate class. Our plan really is to have an intermediate class for each of the tools that we're doing, and then an advanced class. So we'll be doing these are the beginning classes. We'll also be doing an intermediate and then advanced for each of the tools.
So I think your homework for this is obvious. It's to complete filling out your plan for your change wheel and start implementing it.
Yeah.
Go forth and be great.
Go become who the Lord wants you to be.